This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Moving Markets Podcast. I am Jeffrey Dunyan. As always, I am here with Kevin Hurley. Today is Monday, March the 27th, 2023, and the U.S. stock market has recently closed. Kevin, thanks for joining me on the presentation. What did you think about? Let's jump right in. What did you think about today's market move?
Well, let's just say the market couldn't hold its gains. I personally, I think we should be heading down, not up. I don't see any catalyst coming up, so I'll be honest with you. The market kind of confuses me right now. It's up big in the morning, can't hold its gains, flat, up, down. The Nasdaq particularly is frustrating. It's just like I wish it'd make its mind up what direction, what trend it wants to hold on to.
Agreed. Something that you just said, I feel bad. I wanted to open up this segment. My wife is a regular listener to the podcast. Mostly, she listens in to the podcast to make sure I'm not saying anything inappropriate. But it is my sweetheart's birthday today. Happy birthday, Shar! I love you. Um, she's We're celebrating the anniversary of her 29th birthday again. We do that every year on this date, the
Hey,
anniversary of her 29th birthday.
well, happy birthday, Charlene. Nice to hear you're 1 year younger again.
I'm gonna finish this podcast, and then I'm headed up to my kitchen to make her one of her favorite birthday dinners, and kind of set the tone for hopefully a wonderful evening.
Wonderful evening for her or for me?
Well, not you're not invited. Of
Why not?
course, a wonderful evening for her.
My bad.
So anyway, yeah, it's all about her tonight. That's the way it's supposed to be on the birthday, right?
Something like that. I'm biting my tongue right now. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna bite my tongue.
All right,
I think we
all
get so
right.
old.
So
Another birthday, it's like, you know what? Thank God I made it to another birthday.
yeah, that's the way life is sometimes, right?
And I don't know how those women look more beautiful the older they get. I don't trend that way. I'm
I'm
looking.
spoiled. My wife, I swear, she looks like she did, in the first couple of years we were married. I'm waiting for the day to come. I know it's going to happen. I'm going to be out in public with her somewhere. I'm going to see someone that I know that maybe she has not met before, and the person I see is going to ask me if I will introduce them to my daughter. I'm certain it's going to happen.
Yes, the short answer is yes.
But that makes me feel pretty spoiled. That makes me feel good to have a trophy wife. She's more than a trophy wife, but I get the dual benefit of her being awesome in a lot of ways, but also a trophy wife. How's that?
Uh, she is going to listen to this later on.
Yeah, she's going to listen. Since she's going to listen to this later on, I'm going to tell her favorite joke. This one makes her laugh hysterically. So indulge me for a minute. So
Give it to me.
guy goes in to see his doctor. He's like in his mid 50s, still relatively young guy. But he's feeling old and worn down, low energy, just kind of, things seem off a little bit. So his doctor runs all these different tests and blood work and just everything. They look at everything, and finally his doctor is ready to tell him what he's found out and what's going on. So he calls the guy and his wife to come in to the office, and he says to the guy, "Before I talk to you, I'd like to talk to your wife for just a second, and give us just a minute." So they kind of shrug and say fine. The guy stays out in the waiting room. The wife goes into the doctor's office, and the doctor says, "Listen, ma'am, this is kind of serious, and I wanted to have this conversation with you first." He said, "I want to let you know your husband has a very rare disease. It's something we have only discovered in recent years. We've been working on different ways to address this, and it's a very serious, potentially fatal disease. He said, but we have discovered in the time we've been dealing with this that there is a certain enzyme released during sex that will prolong his life and hold this disease in check dramatically. But the thing about this particular enzyme is like it's got to be in his system every single day without exception. So the reality is, your husband needs to have sex every single day to prolong his life until we find other possible remedies for this disease. And the lady just kind of sits there nodding at the doctor and says, well, thank you for that information. I appreciate it. She goes out to the waiting room to get her husband. And he looks at her and says, what did the doctor tell you? And she said, we can leave. The doctor says you're going to die.
That's brutal. That's
It's my
brutal.
wife's favorite joke. And every time I tell that joke, she says, you don't have much longer to live, probably. So I'm kidding. She doesn't say that. And she actually rolls her eyes at me when I tell that joke, like my kids do when I tell a good dad joke.
Of
So-
course. Yeah, that's a dad joke. Big time dad
All
joke.
right, let's get we had to fill in a little time. Kevin and I were talking before we started the podcast today, and we had to fill in a little bit of time because I'll be honest with you, I don't know that there's a whole lot to talk about today. I agree with what Kevin said. The market is going to be incredibly difficult to predict today. Anyone that says they know what's going to happen in the next couple of days, in the next couple of weeks, I think they're just kidding themselves. This is a really, really tough market to figure out. The Dow, the S&P were both up much higher today than where they finished. I think the Dow gave up close to half of its best gains on the day. I think you can see it right here. I know it's kind of small on for people that are watching the video version of this and not just listening to it. You can see that things were up much higher at one point today than where they finished, and the S&P was able to hold on to probably a little bit less than half of its biggest gains on the day. And so, it's just kind of a weird situation, but it's because there's not. I was looking at the economic calendar today, and when I pull up this economic calendar for those watching the video, you've got a GDP reading that's going to be done at the end of the week on Thursday or towards the end of the week. But isn't this, Kevin, I think you were the one telling me this is like the second or the third revision of the prior quarter's numbers? Because those GDP numbers actually came out like that you're talking about last quarter of 2022's numbers. And this is like the final revision. And then in about 2 weeks, I think we get the GDP numbers for the first quarter of this year. Is that right? Am I off on that?
So yeah, you're a little off on that. This is like they do, how would I say it? They do estimates from where it's going to turn out each quarter. And this is just, it's a third estimate is what they call it at. It's just the GDP for like the Q4 of like the Q4. And they remember the government runs it yearly going from October to October. It's the short answer is that it's not an important GDP number because it's still an estimate. It's nothing that they're banking on other than it might tell us, hey, the last 60 days our economy's been soft. Which do you need an economist to tell you that?
So, but okay, tell me if I'm off on this. This is for fourth quarter, and you can see that on the screen right now. This is for quarter 4 of 2022. But isn't this they release numbers about a week after the quarter ends. So that means about a week into the month of April, we'll get the new numbers for the first quarter, January, February, and March. But then over the course of the next 3 months, they give you 2 or 3 revisions. And I think this one is like the final revision. They call it the consensus, the GDP consensus. And I believe that just means nothing more, nothing less than this is kind of their final revision. So if the first number they gave was like 2.8 and then they gave a revision, it was 2.9, and then they're kind of settling on a final number, and maybe it's 2.7
For
or whatever.
Q4 of last year, you are
Am I
correct.
too far off on that? Am I
Nope,
understanding it
you
wrong?
are correct.
Okay. So the GDP numbers that we look at that help us gauge whether or not we are going into a recession are, and the numbers we get for January, February, and March of 2023, even if it's negative GDP, you'd still have to have the next quarter also be negative GDP to say that we're in a recession. A lot of people are predicting we will go into a recession sometime this year. They don't know if it will be first and second quarter that take us into recession, or if it's more likely to be second and third quarter or third and fourth quarter. But I think there's a general consensus that we probably will see at least a mild recession.
So let's talk about that, since there's not a whole lot to say with what's coming on last week of the quarter, right? So we probably will have some rebalancing. What do you think? We going into a recession, yes or no?
Well, I think we are, and I personally, I think it's going to be worse than what I think the people that are saying it's going to be a really soft recession or that we're not going to go into a recession are as detached from reality as the stock market has been at times in the last 5 or 6 months.
Ooh, so I believe we were in a recession last year, right? 2 negative
Well,
GDP quarters.
we were technically, because we did have 2 quarters in a row that were negative GDP, but that's when the media and the administration went out of their way to try to redefine what a recession was. It's like,
Right?
yeah, we're having a recession, but it's not really a recession.
It's not a
And
real
I mean,
recession.
I feel worse for the people that believe that garbage when it's spread than for the idiots that are spreading it.
Okay,
Um,
well, here's the reason why I was asking, because I'm going to be one of those that tells you it's going to be a soft recession. It's going to be like last year. It's going to be a mild, soft landing recession. My belief on the reason why is because the government can't let us go into a recession when it comes to, I kind of want to say an election year, right? And I just, it's my belief that they're going to get bailed out again, and that's what's going to make it a mild recession. You
but
hear this,
what
oh, the banks are bailing it out. I call bull crap. It's the Fed that's bailing it out. They have to cover $600 billion. So, with all due respect, this 30 billion that they're giving out doesn't scratch the surface. There are more banks that were poorly managed. It's a problem from start to finish, and it's going to be solved with the bailout.
But what bails us out of a recession? What is it that bails us out of a recession? I mean, I'm of the belief that the
Printing the
Fed,
money, baby.
when the Fed met last week, we had that one big sell-off day on Wednesday, primarily because they not only raised rates, which some people were betting against that. I think most people still thought they would raise a quarter of a percent, a 25 basis point. They went through with that. But Jerome Powell remained very committed to analyzing data and did not say definitively that the next time they meet, they would not raise rates. Now, there is a belief that they're going to pause, and if they do in fact pause, I think that lessens the chance of a deep recession. I would lean towards your side and say maybe a soft recession, but I don't think they're going to pause. I think you're going to get PPI and CPI numbers that are going to be higher than expected. We've had a couple of months in a row where those numbers have been lower than expected, and I think that's a hangover or a residual effect of some of the gas prices going lower back around the holidays, but gas prices have been steadily going back up now. And when gas prices go up, it filters into everything. The cost of producing things goes up. The cost of what we pay to buy things goes up. I think the CPI and PPI numbers are going to come in next month hotter than expected, and that's going to make everyone believe that the Fed has to keep tightening. And if they continue to tightening, it will push us into a recession. So
So we talked
I,
about this, what, 4 or 5 weeks ago? We're still having an increase in inflation. It's not as bad month over month, but our inflation is still increasing well above a yearly 2% level.
And I read, okay, just before you and I got online, I was watching the one of the financial stations that I tune into, and just before you and I got online, one of the headlines that came across is either 21 or 22 months in a row now that wage inflation has been negative. And for some of our listeners that don't know what that means, it means that even though wages are going up a little bit, they're not going up as high or as fast as inflation, which means every month there is negative wage inflation. It means the gap between rising wages and rising inflation widens, and not in a good way. In other words, people are starting to earn more money each month on average, but not as much as the price of goods and services are going up. So we continue to fall farther and farther behind on that wage inflation gap. And look at this one headline that I've got on the page here. Disney will roll out the first of 3 layoff rounds this week, according to a memo from Bob Iger. We had we on the video that we had on the screen a few weeks ago the list of all the companies that are in the process of or have already laid a lot of people off, and it goes way beyond the tech sector. I think I think the job numbers that we've got the last couple of months have been. I think there's some funny accounting going on and some funny math going on, because every indication is that job growth is not what it seems to be, and there are some chinks in the armor in that job market. And that's another reason I think we're headed for more than just a soft recession, or what you termed and what a lot of people term as a soft landing. I think it's going to be worse than people are expecting.
Bailout. It's going to be bailed out. But with that said, guess who went shopping last week? Oh, yeah, this guy did. And once again, I'm kind of astonished. Cost me $100 to fill up the truck with diesel. What used to be $3.99 last year for a 1 pound package of meat is $5.67. I'm still paying $22 for 5 dozen eggs instead of $9.99. Milk didn't seem as bad as I was expecting it, but it's just, I was kind of shocked at how much we were paying for food, which again, I think my family just gets the staples, right? Breads, well, loaf of bread that used to be $2 for, was $2 per loaf, 4 bucks, now costs me 7. It's shocking.
It's crazy, man.
I'm not going to feed my kids this next month and see how that helps out our budget.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, listen, we don't. There's not. There's not as much to talk about this week as there has been. We've got that GDP final estimate. The jobs numbers are always kind of fun to watch. Um, Personal income, Chicago PMI, consumer sentiment, all coming on Friday. But by the time those reports hit, they could certainly affect what happens in the market on Friday. But the the market could already be far enough up that it's not going to change an up week. It could be far enough down that it's not going to change a down week. I think until we get to Friday, you're going to see some seesawing back and forth. I think a lot of what the Dow and the S&P gain today will probably reverse tomorrow. I think you could, where you had a down day in the Nasdaq today, you could have an up day in the Nasdaq tomorrow. I just think it's going to be back and forth this week. And when all is said and done, when we're looking at a chart at the end of the week, I think you're going to see a tightening in these technical indicators, a consolidation on the S&P. I think it's going to remain between 4,000 and maybe 3925, and sort of tighten up around that 3975 mark. I just don't see. But let me, as I say that, let me tell you the one X factor that could change it all. It's going to be a headline driven week. So if there is a headline on any given day that is very positive or very negative, you could see a big market reaction on any given day just based on a headline versus an actual economic event or calendared report of some sort.
Well, I'm just going to tell you, it's going to be down. It's going to be down because it's the end of a quarter. You're going to get some churning in mutual funds. we're pretty much a flat month, but we had a good run in January up to February. I'm calling it down. I'm calling it like a 2% down week, just because people rotate in and out of funds.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I think there could be a lot of seesawing back and forth, but if you force me to give you a prediction, I would say probably overall it's going to be down on the week. But then again, there's been a lot of weeks where I've thought that, and I seem to be wrong as often or more often than I'm right on thinking I know what the market is going to do. Boy, there's been times in the past where you could predict it and be accurate 75, 80, 90% of the time. It's a choppy, difficult market to predict right now. I would tell all of our listeners, beware the people that tell you definitively things are going to be up or things are going to be down, because everyone should be honest enough to admit to you that it's a little more guesswork than it is. We all make educated guesses in the market, but there's a little less education, a little more guessing going on right now.
Definitely. Most definitely.
All right, Kevin, I don't think there's much more we need to visit about today. You got any parting comments? Otherwise, we'll wrap up and we'll be back next week to talk about whether we had any clue what we were talking about or not.
Happy birthday, Charlene. You guys have a wonderful week, and I'll look forward to talking to you on Monday.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.